But one of the things that is someone's prerogative is sharing his opinion, and that is Elon Musk. He is, I think it's no surprise that he bought a social media platform because this guy likes to talk. He
Yeah,
likes to have.
he has opinions.
Again, this guy's going to get us to Mars, so like he starts ahead in a lot
Yeah.
of ways. And I'll listen to anyone that gets us to Mars. But he made some comments just the other day in an interview with sort of author, psychologist, public pundit, whatever you want to call him these days, Jordan Peterson, and made a very interesting. It's like a 2.5 hour interview.
Yeah.
They cover a lot of ground in this thing, but kind of the section that seems like a lot of people like us are pulling out of like that's interesting, or that whatever your opinions on it, kind of come down to where Peterson's sort of asking him about his like religious viewpoints, or this what does he think about Christianity? And he made an interesting statement, and I think we can jump into it because in many ways I feel like it reflects a lot of just like wider mindsets we have in our culture. But Musk says this. He says, "Well, I'm not a particularly religious person. I do believe that the teachings of Jesus are good and wise. I would say I'm probably a cultural Christian. There's tremendous wisdom in turning the other cheek." And then he kind of expanded on that eventually to describe what he would call his own religious beliefs as the religion of curiosity, the religion of greater enlightenment. And just sort of the phrase cultural Christian is the one that sort of jumps right off the page or the audio file or whatever, wherever you're getting it. And it's interesting. People have opinions on that. But I feel like that in many ways is like a succinct way that represents a lot of what we see happening in culture today. So that cultural Christianity. What were some of because you watched some of this interview.
Yeah, I listened to a bit of it. And that is, I think first off, it's not terribly surprising that that's sort of where he lands sort of in the more or less religious beliefs. And I think it is indicative of sort of a wider trend. I think especially among people like Musk, even, people like Jordan Peterson. I'm not sure what his religious affiliation is at this point, but maybe people in that sphere of influence, I feel like a lot of them probably are some version of cultural Christian. And I think you see it play out though in I would say perhaps more negative ways, kind of downstream, which is fighting the culture wars in a more political sense. And, even talk some of what we talked about last week of how there is this conflation of Christianity with like conservatism and more right-wing political factions. And so it's interesting, but I think it can be sort of, I think, damaging to what Christianity is. And it's not surprising that someone like Musk would kind of land in this area, but it is kind of an interesting I guess admission from him. And it's I think he sees this in a very positive light, whereas I think from those within the church, when they use words like cultural Christianity, it's typically a negative thing when you're looking at the culture around you, and it's like, well, it's Christian in culture, but not really in
because I almost feel like
actuality.
there's almost like two, because in some ways I feel like he's using cultural Christian slightly different than like how you might use it in the Bible Belt of like I feel like there's like we live in the Bible Belt, we're in Georgia, or at least south or east of the Bible Belt, and like sort of that sense that like, hey, this is a Christian country, and like there's sort of that assumption that hey, I'm kind of Christian because it's America, and there's churches every time I drive past to go.
I go to church on Christmas and Easter.
Yeah, like sort of that sense where I feel like Musk maybe falls into some of that, but like I feel like his kind of use of cultural Christian is almost like more specifically like what is the culture. Like he's not just swimming in that pool. But it is very much like I believe in that is better for our society if we operate as Christian. Don't need to be Christian.
The principles of
like the principles of Christianity are better. And I feel like something like you were saying is almost inevitable when you start sort of your viewpoints from like the negative perspective of what you're not. Like I feel like for Musk, it's a lot of, hey, well, I see what he would call the woke mind or mind virus. He sees all the stuff he doesn't like in culture, and the Christian kind of principles and some of that teaching, some of the stuff she just said, is sort of different than that, and he seems it's better. So he sort of latches onto that rather than starting with like, what is Christianity? Like, is Christianity just these principles, or does Christianity, need to deal with Christ? Like, do you need the, or you just have anity or whatever you take out the Christ? And I feel like that sort of that conflation of just, hey, Christianity is just sort of this way we govern our country, and it's just like these rules that are good to live by, is just so prevalent today. Like, I think even people in the church who may well, still be saved, like can fall back to that. Like, I think that's why you see so much the allure of like politics and like the need to legislate. Like we got to have the 10 Commandments in the classroom, or we got to have like, in Oklahoma, I got to have like the Bible is a prominent part of the like, we need to like force it because Christianity is about principles, and if we don't have those principles, then we don't have Christianity. Because there was a quote. A tweet from Elon Musk, which I feel like is sort of the embodiment of, I think, why this viewpoint goes off course. This is right after, which we talked about last week, the opening ceremony with the either mockery or not mockery of the Lord's Supper, where Musk tweeted out, said, "Unless there is more bravery to stand up for what is fair and right, Christianity will perish."
Bold claim.
Yeah,
bold claim.
We survived Nero, but if that opening ceremony doesn't mean to us, if then Christianity is like,
if we don't quell that rebellion, then we're done for. I think that'll be the end of Christianity as we know it.
Which seems so like it seems such a shallow and like just crazy statement to think like Christianity can't. There's people in culture, like there are people in culture literally killed Jesus, and the church is still thriving. Like, well, that people are like mean in culture, and not everyone. Like, that's gonna like Christianity like perish. But it makes sense when
it does.
When if your viewpoint is Christianity is just these good principles, because if those principles are challenged, if you take away the power of Christ, like it's just teaching. If society rejects those, then Christianity ceases to exist.
Yeah. Well, I think when you look at Christianity as sort of the building blocks of the West, and it is sort of the principles to govern and to live by and good morals, etc., then I think that you end up in a place like this, where if we don't eradicate sort of the woke nonsense, then we will perish, and perhaps the West will perish. But like Christianity was around like long before the West was around, and it will be long after. And so it's just it is a pretty shallow view, I think, of Christianity, and it just reduces it to these principles without any of the power or the central figure of Christianity, which is Christ himself. And so it's just this weird sort of, again, conflation of, I think, Western values with Christianity. And although there is overlap, like Western values or, conservative values or whatever, classical liberal values does not equal Christianity. And so I think but there is such a blurring of that line right now. It's hard, I think, for people to kind of separate the two.
Yeah, and I think that's even like why I would, which we talked about several episodes ago, like with something like the 10 Commandments, like why I feel like that's not effective is, you can make people act Christian all you want, but like unless you have Jesus, then you're not offering. You're just offering them some principles, and like principles aren't going to save or set this country right. Like without, and I feel like in some ways this mindset becomes attractive because it's sort of like we want the benefit of the good life Jesus offered. We just don't necessarily want Jesus. I feel like even guys like Richard Dawkins, who's like as atheistic as you can get, is like. I think he's even referred to himself almost as culturally Christian. Like in the same way Musk does. Of like, I think it's evil. I think it's a bunch of lies and nonsense. But I can't deny that the society run with those principles is better than one run by other principles.
And like a life lived with those principles.
The meaning and just, all the stuff that sort of the Christianity has, brought about in society to make it flourish.
Yeah.
It's just that we want that, but like we don't want to be like, indebted to Jesus or have to like have a new responsibility
or any recognition that you're like a sinful person who needs a savior, like, which is the thing that I think people get tripped up by, because Musk's version and maybe Dawkins' version of it is, well, you just get you do your own thing, you live, you try and live a life that lives up to these higher principles, and it's all on you and it's all in your control. And I think that's what's so attractive about it, because it's like, oh well, I can just be a good moral person and not kick puppies and be nice to my neighbors and be an upstanding citizen, and that's, yeah, I feel great about that, and that's how I'll live my life. That's super attractive, I think, to people, because it's all about you, and it's all what I can do to be this right
like it puts
person.
you in charge, which I think this is such a growing, prevalent mindset of like, it gives you sort of this opportunity to stand up for these values and kind of fight this war and stuff without like submitting before Christ, or like having it is very like active, and like, you're the one that's you got to go put this down and for it. I think that's why the culture war is such an attractive thing.
Well, and it puts the emphasis then on political action versus on like personal personal behavior and trusting Christ to do what only he can do. And so the outworking of that sort of Christianity, I think, is very much like political activism, in whatever form that takes.
Which, like, to me, and again, it's way more complicated of a discussion, but like is almost more dangerous than any of the stuff that they're fighting against. Like, I think,
right.
Which I think why Jesus would say, don't be lukewarm. Like it's better to either be all in or all out. But where it gets messy is when it's sort of, you conflate, you water down, you sort of have Christianity.
Yeah.
You just don't have the stuff that makes it Christianity. Like, I feel like that spreading to me is going to lead more people astray than very clear, even like blatant mockery or like antagonism towards the church, which like throughout history has proven doesn't make the church perish. Like
right.
You can literally kill Christians in mass, and the church is going to keep going
and in fact thrive.
But I feel like the complacency of like, well, we're sort of Christian, we just don't need Jesus. That to me can be more dangerous. But hey, we'd love to hear what you guys think. If you're listening to us, send us a message, or if you're watching us on YouTube, jump in the comment section. Sort of how you navigate that, because I do think that is such a pivotal discussion and question. I think like not just like right now, but like in the future for the church is going to have to wrestle with.
Yeah, for sure.
But